Alright guys, so we're a couple of days away from the 5.2 campaign that's going to be hitting the JP version of the game, and I kind of wanted to do another speculation video talking about what servants might be receiving buffs for this campaign. As we know, like 3 different servants, Achilles, Jason, and even Chiome received some buffs over for the 5.1 campaign, so I kind of wanted to just draw some speculation, talk about it, do a little talky talk here on the channel on what of these servants could actually get some buffs. And we have a pretty good idea. Now, Europa did release for like 5.1, and the fact that she didn't get one for the 5.1 thing and she wasn't on rate up kind of leads me to believe that someone like her or Canis might actually get one for 5.2, which is kind of what I was originally speculating because they have a bigger part in 5.2 as opposed to 5.1. But before we begin, if you have not already, make sure you leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel for daily FGO content. If you want to see your boy stream, he streams every weekday over on his Twitch at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you want to see your boy play Fate Grand Order, you know, Dark Souls, Yu-Gi-Oh, all sorts of stuff is what is played over there on the Twitch. That is in the description down below. But with that being said, we have a few days until the live stream actually hits, so I wanted to talk about a few of these servants and possible buffs that they might get. So first and foremost, there's Europa. I feel like with this servant, they'll just give her a buff to her NP, just to kind of give her a little bit of damage, because if you look at Europa's kit, she's kind of got everything already. She's got the coup dodge skill, but instead of it being dodges, it's invincibility. So it's literally better. Like, it's 3 attacks, never runs out, really OP. The fact that she gives herself a 30% buster buff that also combines to being a buster mana burst at bare minimum when she fires her own NP also is really OP. Plus, the buff to the NP gauge and the arts cards that she has 2 of makes her really good for refunding her NP. And then she also has this nice like reduction of defense for extra damage, and she has like the Shuten AoE charm skill, right? So she's kind of just already got everything in general. She could maybe use like a crit damage buff to maybe take advantage of any stars that she might generate, or a skill that just bombs some stars for her to do crits with. But overall, if they buff Europa, I feel like just a solid buff to the NP where they're like, oh, we just increased the damage scaling. I don't know, maybe throw in like a 10 or 20% NP damage buff before she like actually attacks to give her even more damage if they think that's necessary. Might be kind of good, but as far as like special damage mods and whatnot are concerned, I don't really think that's really going to be in the consideration here. But then again, they gave Chiome a demonic damage mod and a curse damage mod, so I guess everything's really here on the table. But Europa, I think, is fine. I really don't think she really needs anything. Romulus, very similarly to like Super Orion, I don't think they're going to touch this guy at all. This guy, if you've never used him, allows you to do just absolutely disgusting amounts of damage in specific team comps. He allows you to like meme just so much in the game, just for the fact that like you can slap Roman on the entire enemy party and then bring Boudica, who's like a free-to-play servant basically, right? Because everybody should have access to Boudica, who gives your whole party like damage mod against Romans, and you can see how this slowly gets out of hand. There's even some team comps where then you also use like Siegfried, who then like buffs himself against dragons, and you turn the dragon enemies into Romans, give him the damage mod against the Romans, and stuff really tumbles out of control really quickly. But as far as him as a servant, he's got everything he's needing, right? Like, he's got crit damage, he's got good attack, he's got survivability, a battery, 30% as well, which is really good for the current buster meta, because even though it's not the ideal 50% that Koyanskaya wants, it does pair very nicely with a pen skill to make a quote-unquote fake 50% battery, which could be really good for that meta. And then he's also got a buster buff, right? He's literally got everything he wants. Also, the star weight is pretty nice for the turn that you have it. Not the hugest thing because it's only 1 turn, but still, it's nice that he literally has pretty much everything a buster servant would want. Like, battery, can drop stars, attack buff, crit buff, buster buff. Like, this guy does not need to be touched. And if he gets a buff, I will be pleasantly surprised. If Romulus receives a buff in a few days, I'll be flabbergasted, right? Now, Canis is one that I actually think is very likely to get a buff, because Canis is kind of like the main girl or person of freaking Lostbelt 5.2. She's Wodamin's servant. She's like the final battle of it. She kind of accompanies through she accompanies us through like a lot of 5.2, so I think she's pretty obviously in line for a buff. And there's a lot of skills that we could actually shine some light on. Like, for instance, this skill, kind of an L magnet. It doesn't do a whole lot. It's just attack. It doesn't do anything else, right? They buffed this, gave her the battery. This is fine. They don't need to buff this again. This helped her out a lot. But then you also have this, right? Which is just like decent survivability. So I think either this or this would receive a buff. Probably this is going to receive some kind of buff, whether it be crit damage, drop stars, whether it be a buster buff, something along those lines. Probably more damage for her, right? Because when you look at her first and third skill as which one is like more lacking, it's probably the first skill, because at least this is a guts plus damage taken. This is literally just, all right, 40% attack for 2 turns. That's a lot of attack, but she needs more stuff to give her more damage. I mean, her NP probably could also be buffed, maybe. Like, maybe she drops her NP and then it also drops like 20 stars. Maybe something along those lines, but the effects on her NP are already really strong. I mean, 50% crit damage that stacks because it's on a 3-turn cooldown, and NP damage that also stacks. Both of those are really good. So maybe they could give this a buff for like the higher damage or something, and maybe it bombs stars, but I really wouldn't touch a lot of the stuff on the NP because this stuff is really, really good. I'd maybe just add like bomb stars or additional crit damage. That way she has a way to access crit damage from her NP and from her skills naturally, right? I think that'd be really, really good for Canis, but I would definitely keep your eye on her. I definitely think because they didn't buff her in 5.1, she's probably going to get one in 5.2. Musashi, this kind of depends, because I think obviously if they want, they could just be like, slap 50% battery on Musashi, dust off their hands, call it a day, right? Something like that would make her one of the most broken servants in the game, because as you guys know, Musashi can do like insane, redonkulous amounts of damage, especially after they buffed her NP, where they were like, you know what? What if Musashi also just obliterated all the alter ego and moon cancer enemies in the game? What if she just decimated all of them, right? So after that, she became even more ridiculous, because if you didn't have someone that could deal with alter egos like Kama, or you didn't have a good ruler that could deal with moon cancers like, say, Estrella, or even like Summer Martha even, you could just use Musashi. They could maybe tidy up some of her skills. Maybe the worst thing that she's kind of lacking is NP generation, because while her NP gain is really good, her one arts card kind of makes it a little hard. You could say that like this double hits thing does allow her to basically have a 100% battery, because if you crit on this arts card while she has this skill up, she'll pretty much refund her whole NP, because doubling hits is broken. But you might want to have another way to refund things outside of the first skill, and everything around Musashi is kind of like burst damage based, right? You know, everything is like 1 turn except for like the star gen right here. For some reason that's 3 turns, but everything here is like 1 turn based, right? She doesn't do anything for like longevity. So maybe if you want to play into that, make her a little more consistent, slap a 50% battery on like this and call it a day. That actually might be a really good thing to give Musashi. I think she might get a buff, because Musashi's kind of like Skahawk, where she's really strong, she can do a lot of damage, but because she's kind of like a quote-unquote one-pump chump, like she does a lot of damage at once, and then her damage falls off because all of her buffs are 1 turn, they might be willing to give her something really strong like that. So I think she might get a buff, played a very, very big part in 5.2. I wouldn't count her out. Now, a servant that I don't think really needs a buff, but they might get one, is Dioscuri. Dioscuri, I've gone on record numerous times being like, they have this is pretty much all they need. Like, look at how broken their Quicken Arts cards are, and then they were like, yeah, what if their Quicken Arts cards were also just all the same card? What if the Quick cards also gen NP, and the Arts cards also gen, you know, crit stars, right? They're broken. Everything else here is bonus. Oh, they increase NP damage and attack. Nice. They triple buff themselves with NP damage, attack, and where is it? Over here. And then their card buff, right? Plus, oh yeah, they also just have a survivability as well. They just have everything. But what if they also just pierced invincibility and defense and also reduce the enemy's hearts and quick resistance as well? They literally do everything, right? I don't really think there's anything they need to give these guys. If they give them anything, I don't know, it's probably going to be like a 20% battery or something, or maybe they buff this skill and make these like 3 turns maybe, so they can have like a little bit more like longevity in fights. But these guys might get buffed because they're kind of like, maybe Lasengel sees them as like aging or something along those lines, and I'm throwing up huge air quotes, but I think they're perfectly fine. They might get like a battery or something, or they might just be like, hey, they got a buffed NP where we just up the damage scaling so their damage is a little higher. Maybe we have these proc first. They really don't need anything, right? I'm still banking on like Canis and Musashi. Although Caligula also arguably might get a buff. So we saw 3 buffs in 5.1. If we think that they might give 3 buffs as well, I think Canis, Musashi, and Caligula could be really strong. Canis is very popular and kind of needs a buff. Musashi is very popular, doesn't really need a buff, but would be really, really strong. And Caligula is a strong free-to-play option because he's a 2-star that you can get from the friend point gacha. And I think it'd be really good to maybe buff him up a little bit. The only problem is I have no idea how they're going to save this guy. Like, Caligula is such a weird servant where it's like, yes, we want to go ahead and activate our NP, reduce their defense and seal all of their stuff, and then punch them with big skills, with big buster performance and big attack buff, because these do multiply into each other. But I don't really know what they're going to do with this guy. Like, unironically, you might want to be like, the 3rd skill now gives 50% buster, it gives 50% crit, and it bombs 30 stars. The buster and crit are for 3 turns flat out. You get them for whatever. But then again, it's on a 3-turn cooldown, so that might be a little bit too broken. But seeing as he is like free to play, and I'm using this very loosely, but like free to play Orion in the way that he does face card damage, maybe that would make him like good, maybe. You know, I'm very loosely saying good because then, you know, every 3 turns this would always be up. I don't know. That might be really interesting, but yeah, he's one that I'm like, I'm pretty sure they're going to give him a buff, but I'm like, I have no idea what they're going to give him. That's probably what I would do. I'd be like, screw it. His 3rd skill is on a super low cooldown. Just have his buster buff be like 50% 3-turn cooldown, 50% crit damage, 3-turn cooldown, 30 stars. Boom. He just spams it all the time. And if someone was like, but sir, what about Koyenskaya who lowers skill cooldown? I'm like, dude, if they want to use Caligula with Koyenskaya, let them do it, right? Like, let them have their fun. If they want to use Caligula, I do not care, right? I don't think that's going to break the game. But with that being said, that's kind of my predictions and kind of my thoughts on what they might do for some of these servants. I think it's probably going to be Caligula because he definitely serves a huge part in 5.2 because, spoiler, if you haven't played 5.2, he's the reason we get the Grand Servant Lancer Romulus, right? But I don't think they're going to buff Lancer Romulus because for the same reason they didn't buff Super Orion, he's already too good enough. Canis could definitely use a buff. She's very popular, very story relevant. I think they could do her. And Musashi doesn't necessarily need a buff, but she would definitely appreciate one, like maybe something that makes her a little bit more consistent, or maybe bomb stars or something along those lines, a crit damage buff even. Something like that would be very appreciated, and Musashi is also very, very popular, right? So I think those are the directions they might go, but I love reading your guys' comments on these discussion videos because I love to see what you guys think about things. You know, ever since I like introduced doing the Did This Character Fall Off series with Gilgamesh, I saw so many like interesting ideas. So leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Who do you think they're going to buff? Do you think maybe I'm wrong on like Europa's fine and they won't give her just like an NP damage buff? Maybe you think she needs something else? I would love to hear what you guys think in the comments down below. But with that being said, make sure you leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, check out the Twitch, and I will catch you guys in tomorrow's video. With all that being said, peace late, guys.